Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran. Patch 8.3 is actually going to be upon us very soon. It's just around the corner, and in less than 2 weeks, we'll finally be able to play the very last patch of Battle for Azeroth, while we all eagerly anticipate Shadowlands. And of course, the question of which class you should be playing in patch 8.3 has always come up. Whether you guys are asking me what is looking like a really strong class or a solid choice, what might be the safest pick, and which specs might be some of the more standout ones. But in this video, I'm gonna go over the 5 specs that I am personally planning on playing in patch 8.3 for one reason or another, and hopefully this might give you guys an idea. If you're looking for a specific spec or a playstyle, you might find the ones that I enjoy also enjoyable, and it might help you guys figure out what to play for patch 8.3. Now I'm going to start this in no particular order. One of them you guys can guess 100%. The others I think might be up in the air. But we're going to start off with Hunters. Hunter as a class is always a great class for anyone to play. Right now in Battle for Azeroth, it has some of the easier specs to start with, especially if you start with Beast Mastery. So getting into a Hunter is going to be super easy. With a pet, you can do world quests way easier, and some of the utility that the spec brings plus the damage is quite good, whether you PvP or do raids or dungeons. For me, the spec I'm going to be going with is Survival. Survival has had a really weird playstyle and a really weird spot in Battle for Azeroth, but also back in Legion when it was first introduced. And I feel like in Battle for Azeroth, it really got a lot more refined. I'm finally at a moment with my Survival where I have some of the better gear available for the spec at the time of the patch 8.25. I don't have all the benthics, but I do have the best gear that I can take into dungeons, PvP, or raids, and put out quite a bit of damage. I finally got the spec to a point where I am playing the intended playstyle that goes with the build that I'm currently rocking. And honestly, I love it. I actually enjoy it because there's moments where the spec just gets to like a really weird, very simplistic rotation, and other times where you're trying to juggle a couple different debuffs and are trying to maximize the output. And there's so many smaller things you can do in order to maximize the damage of the spec. And that is something you will need to do if you do want to play Survival, as it has, I would say, one of the higher skill caps in terms of getting the spec working. It's a great melee spec overall, and I honestly enjoy the playstyle. I like the mobility what the spec represents, the ability to engage but also disengage a situation at a moment's notice on your own terms is one of the coolest feelings ever. It's freeing and allows you a lot more movement, whether it's in a dungeon or raid, but particularly effective in PvP. And since the spec focuses on haste gear, once you have enough gear to really make the spec work, I mean, with more haste, it allows you more abilities to put out, it allows you a faster rotation, faster playstyle that's a lot more engaging than some of the specs that you'll find in BFA. And the faster you are able to get your abilities out, the less of dull moments you'll have where there's simply just not a button to press. That's what I really like about the spec. Beastmastery and Marksman don't really interest me nearly as much, but there are always a spec for me to play with in case, for some reason, Survival ever gets boring. Next spec on this list is going to be Shadow Priest, and I think they're still, to this day, one of the best dot caster classes in the game. I know some of you will mention Affliction Warlocks, but let's be honest, I feel like Affliction got kind of neutered for most of BFA. The dots just don't feel quite as good. I mean, a lot of the spec is down to casting UAs, but just Agony and Corruption. Back in the day, those abilities used to be enough to get some serious damage out, literally in the last expansion. And right now, it's just like, it feels like you have to put in more effort in order to be decent at some parts. Unlike with the Shadow Priest, you're able to put up dots and there you go. You get some real dot damage that you're able to put on enemies. What also feels great about Shadow Priest in general is it has really good damage for a caster with very little gear commitment out of all the different classes that I play, and has been the top dog for a majority of this expansion. Even though every single patch this spec gets nerfs left and right, it still remains to be the top DPS contestant in majority of the fights. What I like about Priest in general is also there's the Discipline Priest, which is a great playstyle and overall a very strong healer. What I like about Disc is simple. It has a DPS focused playstyle, so for someone who mostly plays DPS characters, hopping on a Disc Priest and pumping a bunch of damage lets me heal my allies a lot better, and they're continuing this trend going into patch 8.3. So it's always going to be a great hybrid class for me to pick up and play whenever I feel like. The next spec on the list is my Enhancement Shaman, and I'll tell you guys right now, if there's a spec that you truly enjoy playing and you are willing to do the blood of the enemy grind for, which I am doing for my Shaman, and I'm willing to complete it to the end before the next patch release, then that is a spec you truly enjoy. Because blood of the enemy grind is nerfed, but it's still pretty obnoxious, but I really do like the playstyle that Enhancement Shaman offers. I would describe Enhancement as a very busy playstyle, especially if you end up challenging yourself to be very busy, always having an ability to burn, and always looking out for procs. And I like the RNG playstyle for it. Sometimes you'll have more of a structured rotation, where you're trying to build and spend your resources, and other times you just get so many Storm Strike procs that your fingers feel like they're gonna fall off from spamming one key, which is a good thing. I kinda like the fact that the spec changes. Sometimes it's very constructive, sometimes it's very all over the place, and being able to adjust to this playstyle just keeps me engaged and awake. I feel like the spec has great utility, as all the other Shaman specs do. With totems, you have range interrupts, and more, which I like bringing more than just raw DPS to a team. And I kinda like Enhancement for PvP. Call me a masochist all you want, but something about being very squishy, but also having some great burst potential in the back, and also having all this other utility, from purge to range interrupts to breaking allies out of fears to slows to AoE stuns. There's so much to the team that you bring, and while Enhancement Shaman might not be a top dog, top tier, it really does make you feel like you're actually making an impact, even if it's something small like a battleground. The fourth spec on this list, and I think a lot of you guys have seen it, my Outlaw Rogue. But I feel like I should still cover it, just so everybody knows what you're getting into when it comes to playing Outlaw. A lot of people cite an issue with Outlaw on this RNG-based playstyle around the ability to roll the bones. Sometimes you'll roll a buff and it's a good buff, but sometimes you'll need to roll a couple times in a row until you get that one buff that sticks that lets you do actually good damage. And for me, I never really got tired of this playstyle. If you really do get frustrated with it and this is something you hate, I cannot blame you for it. But I don't hate that playstyle. Sometimes you get a good buff, sometimes you don't, and the spec really does average out into a decent damage and decent experience. Sometimes you'll get really good buffs, sometimes you'll get really bad ones, but on average, statistically, it still works out. I also like the fact that Outlaw is a bit of a wild card in PvP, as nobody really knows how to play around it, since not a lot of people play with it, but also nobody knows what to expect out of an Outlaw Rogue in terms of the damage, the pressure, or the type of CC that they can put out. I also like the slight variation in my rotation. Depending on which buff I roll, I adjust my rotation just ever so slightly, but it's enough to stay engaged in the current combat, because sometimes I'm playing some of these specs that have such a cookie cutter, predictable rotation that sometimes it feels like it's just muscle memory, and the rest of the time I'm just kind of snoozing. So Outlaw does give me this variance that I like in my specs. Sometimes I'll get a random proc, sometimes I'll get a burst of resources, and I'm able to spend those resources, and that's something I prefer in my specs. Also, Grapple and Hook is probably one of the best mobility-based abilities, and I think it does the most amount of fun because of how short the cooldown is, because of the way Outlaw plays with combo points and cooldown reduction. So being able to grapple hook all over the place is still super enjoyable. Now, the fifth spec on this list is not going to be of any of the classes that I'm currently playing. And I know it sounds weird, but I was looking at every single other class that I have on my list, on my roster right now, and none of them really gave me the same type of fondness as all the other specs I mentioned on the list. I love me some Red Paladin, Armor's Warrior super cool, I love the playstyle of Fury, and Unholy feels insane amongst Fire Mages, Arcane, and Frost, but none of them really get me as excited to want to log on that character, at least not in the current phase of the game. However, there is one class that I'm missing, and one spec I'm very excited about, and that is Windwalker Monk. Windwalkers, I think by far, objectively have some of the best playstyles in the game. Mostly because of the mastery that forces you to never spam an ability, and you're always having to shift around between generating resources and spending resources. For example, how Jab generates a certain amount of chi, but your Rising Sun Kick spends a certain amount of chi, but your Fist of Fury spends more chi, Blackout Kick spends only 1 chi, so you're always having to do a little bit of this math equation in your head while also making sure you're iterating on your abilities, making sure you never repeat abilities, and I think that playstyle alone has been really well set up since they changed it at one of the expansions. And with the buffs that Windwalkers are getting for single target, it is going to make them feel very similar to Legion Windwalkers, minus the artifact weapon, which I always liked the Legion Windwalker playstyle. And with Valpera coming out, I have another character on the Horde side that can now play a monk. So I'll have a Valpera Fox monk, and I cannot wait to get into some Windwalker action. We all know how strong Windwalkers are in PvP. I'm expecting for them to be much better, maybe not even top tier, but they don't have to be in raiding, but also the single target extra damage is going to make him even more preferable in Mythic Plus dungeons, and that's what I'm really super excited about. And that is, guys, my list of 5 specs and/or classes that I'm planning on playing right now for the patch 8.3. However, there's a good chance that this list changes drastically 2 months into the next patch. We'll have more class changes apply, maybe we'll have different builds for various different classes come out, and certain corruption gear might make certain builds viable. So I cannot wait, and I'm personally super excited about that. But we'll have to wait and see until patch 8.3 releases. But right now, these are the 5 specs that I'm currently the most excited about, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, as well as my reasonings as to why I'm excited about them. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully this maybe makes some of you guys' class selections or spec selections a little bit easier in case you favor my playstyles. Thank you all, and I'll see all of you in the next video.